Hey guys, it's now time to conclude the text by exploring which vices are more close to or which vices are more opposed to the mean when we look at spheres of passion and spheres of activity. I tried to find a table of means and vices of defect and vices of excess that best matched what we had been reading in the text, and I'm pretty sure we can find most of them here. Got to keep in mind every time you look for a table that's been produced by someone else, someone's gone ahead and done further reading, or someone's basically just read that chapter, or someone's basically tried to modernize what the vices, virtues, and vices of excess are. Sorry. So, this again will have some things you're familiar with, but of course it'll have some things that you just didn't cover in chapter 7. Just keep that in mind, okay? So, we're going to explore how vices can be more like or opposed to their respective means. So, we're going to ask the question, what is closer to courage, rashness or cowardice? And we're going to explore how we can use this knowledge about which vice is closer and which vice is further to basically have some tips, get some tips on how we can approximate the mean and be virtuous, because that's not easy. So what I would like you to do is just to score yourself on these two success criteria and do the APK, which is to draw a continuum uh, of one of these spheres of action or spheres of passion. Okay. So let's do a bit of a recap. Now, dispositions are states of character that have been acquired through actions, and they aren't just these things called virtues or the golden mean on a sphere of action or activity or passion. They can also be the vices as well. Vices are dispositions to behave a certain way. So we need to keep that in mind. There are always three vices when we look at the continuum, and these three vices are, pretty much the two vices of defect. Sorry, did I say three vices? Sorry, my brain is a bit fried. It's very late. When we look at these dispositions, we've got the virtue, but we've also got the two vices, okay? So the vice of defect and the vice of excess are both dispositions to behave a certain way. Likewise, the mean, the golden mean, or the virtue is also a disposition to behave a certain way. Now, what Aristotle says in these two chapters is they all contradict each other because they are all somehow opposed to each other, but the most contrary relationship is the vice of excess and the vice of defect. And this is because they are closer to the mean than they are to each other. And because they're closer to the mean than they are to each other, obviously they're more similar to the mean than they are to each other. So obviously the most contrary or the most disagreeable dispositions are both the vice of defect and the vice of excess. So you should take a note. So once he says that, he says, okay, now this equidistant concept, it's kind of not that accurate, all right? Previously, we always said that the intermediate point was the golden mean. It had to be equally distant from both poles, the pole of defect and the pole of excess. But now we're saying it's a bit different now. Some vices are more like the golden mean, while others are more opposed to it. So that means something like this. If we look at cowardice, according to Aristotle, cowardice is less like or more opposed to courage than rashness is. And rashness is closer to what courage is. Alright? Again, if we look at another example, self-indulgence is more different or more opposed to temperance, and insensibility is much closer to temperance. So we should take a note. In all of the continua, or more importantly the language he used, in all of the continuas about spheres of action, or spheres of activity, or spheres of passion, what we're looking at is two vices. One of those vices will be closer to the golden mean, it will resemble it more, whereas the other vice will be more opposed to it, it will be more different than the other vice. Take a note. So he says, look, there are two reasons for this. The first reason is that one, the reason why one of these vices is closer to the golden mean is because they resemble it more. They approximate it more. So the virtue is more like only one of the vices that have been mapped out. But then he also says it's important to look at this and understand that as human beings, we tend, we tend to be attracted to the virtue that is, we tend to be attracted to the vice that is least like the virtue. So even though there is one virtue that is much closer to what the vice is, we as human beings tend to be attracted to the virtue which is least like, we as human beings tend to be attracted to the vice which is least like the virtue. So let's have a look up here. We would be more attracted to self-indulgence than we would insensibility, because self-indulgence is least like temperance. And there is only one vice which closely resembles temperance. And that's all he's saying here. Take a note. So it logically follows that being good is not easy because we are more attracted to the vice which is less like the virtue. But knowing this gives us some important tips to make. First things first, knowing this, we could easily say that we should avoid the most contrary vice. So we should avoid self-indulgence. We can know what it is, and if we avoid self-indulgence the most, we're more likely to err on the side of insensibility, which will get us closer to the mean. Okay? And then he says, once you've had a look at that and you understand that you should be pursuing or trying to avoid the most contrary vice, you should then have a good look at yourself and question yourself about what vices you gravitate towards. Okay? And once you've done that, think about your reactions to both pleasure and pain. Really contemplate them, because that will tell you what vice you're more likely to be attracted to. Okay? Take a note. This then finishes off with Aristotle giving some other useful points, like, for instance, sometimes we are praised for being more like a vice, but very rarely are people blamed or yelled at for being a little bit away from what is the virtuous mean. So the best you can really do is try and approximate that virtuous mean. You won't always hit it, but as long as you're close to it, you know that you're going to start living a good life. And that's where we finish. So you should know now, that's why I got you to draw one of these. I'd like you to really think about which of the vices is a closer or has a closer resemblance to the virtuous mean and which one is more contrary, okay, in all the different spheres of activity and spheres of passion. Did we look at this idea of which ones are more opposed and which ones are more like? Yes, we did. And did we come up with some tips for that? Well, yeah, the main tip is have a look at how you react to certain situations. That will tell you what vice you seem to be more attracted to. The second is that we're more likely as human beings to be attracted to the vice that is most contrary to the mean. So we should try and avoid that once we figure that out through reason. And that's it. All right, cheers.